Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us here today. I'm Fabiana Bacchini, Executive Director of the Canadian Premature Babies Foundation. CPBF is a charitable organization, and our mission is to support and educate Canadian families of premature babies. This Preemie Chat series is one of the many initiatives we have to bring information for families and healthcare professionals. Here, every Friday, we talk with experts, researchers, and parents who share with us their experience and knowledge. Also on our website, canadianpreemies.org, parents will find all kinds of resources and support. For example, we launched a video series called Welcome to the NICU to help parents understand the world of the NICU and what they can do for their babies while they are still in hospital. And we also launched the COVID care program almost a year ago now, offering therapy for families currently in the NICU or those who have been recently discharged. This program is free for families. To apply for the COVID care program and watch the videos, visit the resource section on our website. And today, we are going to talk about an NICU experience, Jacob's journey, the boy born early. And I have here with me Dr. Sandy Moniz, who is a registered clinical and forensic psychologist and author of Jacob's Journey, the boy born early. She has worked in the field of mental health for nearly 20 years and has provided treatment to survivors of trauma for the majority of her career. Sandy is also a mother of two young boys, a 2-year-old and a 3-year-old, one who was born preterm. Sandy, thank you so much for joining us here today. I'm very honored that you are sharing your experience with us and your amazing book.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm happy to be here.
Thank you. So let's start from the beginning. How did you end up in the NICU?
So I was pregnant with my second child. I didn't think there was going to be any issues with Patrick. He went to term. And when I went to my regularly scheduled ultrasound, I believe it was at 20 weeks, there was an issue with my cervix shortening. So my OBGYN referred me to a high-risk OBGYN. And then as time went on, I was becoming more and more high risk and placed on strict bed rest. At 24 weeks, I admitted myself into the hospital, and Jacob decided to come along at 25 weeks and 3 days.
So how was your time in the NICU with him? How was his journey in the NICU?
So it was very scary for me. He was there for 128 days. He did really well at the beginning. I think he went from obviously being intubated to being on CPAP, I think the second day. He was born at 890 grams, so that's just under 2 pounds, which I think is actually heavier than the average 25-weeker, so that was good. But he kept getting infections or viruses, and obviously that meant he was getting intubated, CPAP. So there was a lot of steps forward, but a lot of steps back. Quite the roller coaster. But I think the medical professionals were optimistic because he was micro preemie in the best case scenario. So I kept that in my head along the way of it was under the best circumstances.
Yeah, it is, as you mentioned, a roller coaster. And many parents, if you're still in the NICU, you know that is 1 step forward, 2 steps back, as they always tell us. And it is emotions all over the place. And Sandy, as a psychologist, were you more equipped to deal with the NICU?
No. So you would think that I would be. I've dealt with various or worked with people with various histories of trauma. I've even had my own personal trauma, and I had a miscarriage at 12 weeks with my first pregnancy, but this was totally different and obviously very personal. I didn't know anybody who had a preemie or even been high risk or had a high risk pregnancy. So this was absolutely new territory to me. And, maybe the skills that I've taught others did help in some way. I can honestly say I turned to my husband a lot. I talked a lot with him, but I did cry a lot. I don't know if I was able to sit in the NICU with Jacob at all the first week and not start, crying. I call it ugly crying, but I would leave the NICU and kind of hide behind the elevator and just sob. But as time went on, I asked a lot of questions. Knowledge is power for me. I became very empowered, very knowledgeable on the NICU trajectory, and I practiced gratitude a lot. I wrote in a journal about all the things that I was grateful for, all the reasons that he was going to make it, that he was a fighter. And I kept looking for inspiration. So I tried to be as optimistic as I could in the circumstances.
Yeah, it is not easy. So we talk about a little bit about your strategies of being grateful. I also know you wrote a journal. How important it was to have that journal for you?
The journal was very important, just to be able to document the day, how far he had come, his weight. It gets difficult because, like, the weight can go up and down. But I was able to document anytime a nurse said he was feisty, anytime a nurse said he was adorable. Those were the things that I really clung to. And I think a few weeks in, I started writing thank you cards. I knew that as soon as Jacob was allowed to go home, I was not going to stop for a second to thank anybody, and I was just going to want to go home. So I actually printed out pictures of my older son and wrote on the back, thank you for, helping our family. And every time we had a nurse that I just really was grateful for, I would give her the card at the end of her shift. So that kind of helped me stay focused on the light at the end of the tunnel.
This is so beautiful. Yeah, and very thoughtful of you, because this is something that is so hard to even think about when in the NICU, living that, very stressful moment and into the unknown of the NICU.
Right.
Right. And I think the journal is such a great tool, because we do forget a few years later the details, as much as we don't think we're going to forget it, but we do. I've been out for 8 years now. And it's like, okay, sometimes I forget how little Gabriel was, or all the hurdles I had to, go through in the ICU. And I can see your shadow box there with some memorabilia from the ICU, because yes, they grow and you say, oh my God, he was a 2-pound baby, those tiny diaper. I keep the diaper on my desk at work. I have a Pampers on my desk that I always look at, to give me the perspective for even also for the work that I do. Right. To remember, those families are still in that stage. I'm 8 years out. I don't remember how tiny they are, but it's the perspective. And I also have that gratitude that you have as well from, people who saved his life, and he's here with us today.
Right.
But Sandy, let's talk about help, right? Because many of us are very reluctant to ask for help, to get help. Right. Did you ask for help?
Yeah. I don't know if it was help as much as it was support and validation. So I was I consider myself quite the social butterfly, but when Jacob was in the hospital, mama bear to the nth degree. I was very protective. I didn't let anybody in my family see him right away, where my husband was the opposite. He, wanted people to come. And I warned my sisters and my entire family, don't say certain things, because I reached out to some friends and they would say, oh, he's so tiny, he's so early. And that just made me more scared and more protective. So, when my family did visit and friends, they would just talk about how adorable he was, how miraculous it was that he was so beautiful and so lively. So I don't know if I really asked for help as much as I just asked for hugs and support, and that emotional support. But they definitely offered. I wasn't one that was very good at taking advantage of that, but they did offer to take care of his brother, which was very helpful.
Yeah, that is very important. Also, I want to talk to you about that, because many families, they have siblings, other kids at home. And how did you do with that? Because especially now during COVID, we are all isolated, help is limited. Let's talk about your experience back then, and then you see if you can bring some of that experience to what's happening in the ICUs now, and how can we provide some support for families.
Well, right now my guys are in daycare. So when Jacob was in NICU, I technically should have been, at home or working, right? So going to the NICU was my job. It was my 9 to 5. So I would drop Patrick off at daycare. And then I would visit Jacob for the day, and then Dad would do his shift in the evening, and then I would go back late at night. So we were less of a married couple and more of just parents on a mission. But I definitely took advantage of daycare. I still felt bad. I had that mom guilt that I was putting my son in daycare even though I wasn't working. But I knew, Patrick will understand one day. And I took advantage of, my parents and my sisters who offered their help. So, it was still my small circle of people that I really trusted. So, I know that our daycare is being very careful. So I'm sure parents now, even though it's scary in the age of COVID, they can still drop other ones off at daycare. Even when Patrick was old enough to come to the NICU, we didn't really do that because he was just too difficult to manage. So, I mean, having your small circle of people and the people that you can trust it's obviously important.
Absolutely. And, I had a 3-year-old at home, and I also put him in full-time daycare, and weekends, my husband would take him to Canada's Wonderland and do some activities. And I had that guilt inside me that I was not spending any time with him, because before it was only the 3 of us. He had all the attention in the world, and all of a sudden mom disappeared. And I remember I have a friend who's a child psychologist who used to tell me, "Is just one summer out of the entire life." I said, okay, that's a nice perspective. Because you always think, okay, every day is so precious for our children and we are missing out. But the reality is true. It was, well, a little bit over the summer. We had spring, summer, and fall in the ICU, but you catch up, and then you have so much time with the kids after. And I think when you're in ICU, you do what you need to do. It's a survival mechanism. You do what you need to do to take care of yourself, of your own mental health, right? And try to support the rest of the family, which is not, it is not easy. And we are talking about trying to be positive, and there's so many elements to that journey in the ICU, right?
Right. And it is crazy how much Patrick did retain, because even now he'll say, "Jacob's sick, Jacob in the hospital." So he gets it. And I think he's just happy he's not in the hospital, but he knows that, we need to support everybody in our family. So he's become more compassionate, I think, as a result of the whole process with Jacob.
Absolutely. And you're right. So we don't know how much they're absorbing until, they grow a little older. Because I remember when Thomas, my older son, came home one day from daycare, and there was a sign in our door, oxygen, because Gabriel's getting discharged on oxygen. So they brought the equipment a couple of days before. And then Thomas came home and he said, "Oh, is Gabriel home?" And I was thinking, what did he see in the house that made him think that Gabriel's home? And then there was a sign at the door. It was exactly the same sign from the hospital.
Oh.
It's so amazing how they actually receive information, and so many years later, I see the compassion in him because of, I think, our experience. And I think it's beautiful. I mean, it's hard, but it's still beautiful to see what comes out of that experience for the siblings, right?
Right.
So, Sandy, let's talk about your transition, because you spent time in a level 3 NICU, then you're transferred to a level 2 NICU. And I know from other parents, that is not always an easy transition. How was that for your family?
It was definitely conflicting, because I remember getting the phone call because I was at home at the time. And, the doctor explained that they had a bunch of very critical babies that needed his spot, essentially. So I knew automatically that meant he wasn't critical, which is lovely news to hear about your baby. But at the same time, it's like, oh, really? Like, do we have to move? So, there was no reluctance in moving, because I knew this is a good thing. But at the same time, we didn't have that really, it meant that we weren't going to get that extremely delayed, almost like that delay in gratification of having him graduate from the level 3. Instead, it was transitioning to level 2. It was a totally different environment where there's babies that are really there maybe a day to 2 weeks and they get to go home. So it was much more lax, which made me wonder if he was going to get the same level of care. And the nurses didn't know him. I had to go through the whole process again of learning the doctors, learning the nurses, like who's who and who's going to take care of my baby better than others. And you're around moms who just have a different perspective. I was around moms in level 3 that, were there for months, maybe even a year. and going to a place where moms were saying, I've been here forever, I've been here a week. And it's quite the eye opener. But fortunately, he was only there a couple weeks and we were able to finally go home. So yeah, it was very conflicting because I knew I needed to be happy, but I wasn't.
Right. And then from there, you went home. So that is like, we have all these steps, right? One step down to a level 2 and then preparation to going home.
And it's funny because when you're in the NICU, you know, you have the, I might have forgotten what it's called, when you stay overnight with your baby, the night before you go home. So it was funny because I think it was a Wednesday. They were talking about doing it on Friday. So I was elated. I was telling everybody and I'm like, yes, we're going to have Jacob home for the weekend. And then I went in the next day and they said, we're going to do it tonight. And I was like, what? Wait a second. So they said, are you okay with that? And I was like, no, I'm okay with it. I just didn't anticipate going home earlier. So I was over the moon, but there is that reluctance of, wait a second, how do I know it's time? Like I've been here for, over 4 months, or he's been in hospital for over 4 months. How do we know that he's ready? So it was definitely anxiety provoking and we were more than happy to take him home, but it was very surreal.
And what happened at home? So you took him home, you had that 1-year-old, and I know you had a little bit of a back and forth then.
Right. Yeah. So we got to bring him home. We were elated. We made sure family kind of stayed out of the picture for a bit because we just wanted to soak it in with our family of 4. But he was great with eating, but he wasn't in the clear yet. It was clear that, it was obvious that something was going on. He was still very tired all the time. So we saw our pediatrician right away. Like we had that visit planned. The pediatrician wasn't concerned, but something just didn't sit right. As a parent, you learn to trust your gut. So 3 days later, I brought him into the emergency room and he desatted, something I haven't had to say in a long time. His oxygen levels went down while he was taking a bottle. So we were admitted back into the hospital in the pediatric ICU. He was there for a couple weeks, got the feeding down. And then a few days after he was discharged again, we had to go back in because clearly he wasn't ready yet. So definitely another roller coaster. But then it was a year after that we were able to stay home without any hospital visits. Back in hospital. So
Sandy, how was your first year at home? Because, the first few days at home, like, as you said, is overwhelming. You had the readmissions, wonder if he was ready or not. And he comes home. How was that first year adjusting at home with another child at home? And were you always on the alert?
Yes, definitely always on the alert, especially after those 2 visits. The second one was actually very scary. He was in respiratory distress, so it felt like a very close call. I didn't feel like I could trust my gut anymore. So I was still, making sure we had regular appointments with the pediatrician. I was still kind of talking to some nurses, like on a personal level, and conferring with my other NICU friends. But I think after that second hospital admission, things were pretty good. We just had to be very careful because he went home in November, which NICU parents know, RSV season, we're all on alert. So there were those close calls. After that, Dad got to stay home. So he was taking a parental leave. I went to work. And fortunately, we were able to keep him out of hospital for a while. But I think Dad went through what a lot of parents go through when they have a new child or a new baby, is it took a while for Patrick to get used to this other person taking up Mom and Dad's attention. So, and they still have that battle. But yeah, it was just nice to see our family together at home. I feel like, no matter what happened, it was just nice to have us together.
Absolutely. I think it's the day that we wait the most in that ICU that sometimes it feels like it will never come because it's such a long journey for so many families. But Sandy, now Jacob is 2.5 years old. How is he doing? Is it fun? You mentioned a little bit they have that brothers fight. I think it's something that We don't take for granted as NICU parents, because we want that to happen.
Yeah, I mean, I'd love to say it was smooth sailing as soon as he got home, but it wasn't. So in the winter, there are still some emergency room visits, but it's gotten to the point where, like I said, my husband and I have like these honorary neonatology degrees where we go in, we kind of spit out all the medical jargon, everything that we know about his what's going on, what medicine he needs. We get it and we can get out. He did spend not the most recent Christmas, but the Christmas before in hospital. He got the flu, he got pneumonia. Sometimes it's just too much for him to fight. But I do see him getting stronger. Like the last time he did get sick and we went to the emergency room, he was satting fine. His oxygen levels were great. We just have to give him maybe some extra medicine and some extra monitoring. So I do see him building strength, and myself, I guess. But yeah, he's crazy. He climbs the counters. He's happy. He loves his cuddles. He loves his brother. He's very verbal. So he's wonderful. I can't imagine him being any more rewarding and adorable.
Oh, that is wonderful to hear. So let's talk about your book. I'm very excited about your book. It is a beautiful book. And what made you write this book? While we talk, I will share the book over here, and I will share on the sorry, can you still hear?
Yeah.
Okay. I will share on the chat the link for the video. So this is the book cover, Jacob's Journey, the Boy Born Early. Okay, and can you talk about your book? So what made you write the book?
So essentially, I was just writing it for Jacob. I was writing a poem that I just wanted to read to him when he was a bit older, and I was kind of using some pictures that I'd taken during his NICU journey, and I was just going to go to like Staples and kind of have it bounded, and that was it. And then I kind of thought, hey, what if I actually have this published? Since I did actively look for books while I was in the NICU to read to him, because I always read to him bedside, and I was running out of my poetry and Dr. Seuss and Robert Munch. And the books that I found at the time were not inspirational, and they didn't give me much hope. So I kind of went through it with my husband, and he was, encouraging me more than anyone I could imagine. And then I just decided to publish it in hopes that it could fall in the hands of other NICU parents and give them the hope that I wish I had at the time.
Absolutely. And I think this is so important. I'm going to share here the link for your Facebook page. So tell us about your Facebook page. What do you share there, and where families can find the book?
So I essentially on the Facebook page, obviously I always share a little update about Jacob, but I also share a little bit, so it's a blog essentially, but I also share a little bit about my thoughts, what I went through, things like looking for preemie clothes, not always being supported, maybe stigma around preemie babies or other things related to having a preemie or even just being a mom. And then people can message me over Facebook or through the page and ask me for a copy of the book directly, and I can send them one, or they can go through Indigo, Barnes & Noble, Amazon, and buy it online if they're more comfortable with that route.
Absolutely. It is such a beautiful book. I had the pleasure to read the book. Do you have one with you? Can you show us some of the pictures inside? Because we could not play the video on the screen, but I will share the link.
So we essentially start from the beginning. So obviously Jacob was very tiny. And then that was him with the CPAP. That's kind of hard to see. And then I have some pictures of, granddad holding him. This is him when he finally got to go home in his car seat. And then I guess this is a spoiler alert, but this is essentially him. Whoops. When we finally got our newborn shoot. So I was that mom that didn't get a newborn shoot with my first because I was nervous it wasn't going to go as planned. And then, of course, with Jacob, I had it scheduled to the date. And then I had to keep emailing our lovely photographer and say, sorry, can't do it yet. Sorry, can't do it yet. So it turned out to be like a newborn shoot / Christmas shoot when we did finally do it. So he's not as tiny as most newborns in a photo shoot, but I couldn't imagine it being any better.
Wow, that is wonderful, Sandy. I will ask you if you have a message for parents right now watching you, and if they're still in the ICU, you have the book, you share your journey, it's a successful journey, brought your baby home. So what can you tell parents?
I really do want to say again, there's no specific way to manage your experience. You're allowed to feel whatever you want to feel. You're allowed to have whatever thoughts you want to think, but just be mindful of what's helpful and what's not helpful. And don't be afraid to reach out. And also don't be afraid to be careful about who you're reaching out to. Like I said, you do just want to be mindful of who you're reaching out to, but there's no specific way. And you can get through it. It is amazing how strong one can be when they need to be. And, every breath that you get from your baby is an absolute blessing. So it's hard to do, but try to take it in as much as possible. I didn't say this before. I actually couldn't take pictures of Jacob when he was when he was first born. It was too hard for me to take in. So I just kept telling my husband to do it. And I'm so glad I did, because I would have regretted not having those photos.
Oh, it's so true. Absolutely true. So, Sandy, thank you so much for joining us here today. I will have your email here if people want to contact you, get a copy of your book, or join your blog on Facebook. I think it's very important for families to connect with other families who had experience. I think peer support is such an important thing, because we do understand the journey. We might have different experiences at an ICU, but we understand what an ICU is. And CPBF has a great parent group on Facebook that is open to any families who have an ICU experience, whether you are in an ICU or at home with your baby. But Sandy, thank you so much. It was a pleasure talking to you and talk about your book and your experience. That was amazing. Thank you.
Thanks. Sorry, I just forgot to mention a portion of the proceeds do go to a NICU. And if you can't afford the book, please let me know and I'll make sure you have a free copy. Thanks so much, Fabiana.
Oh, that is wonderful, Sandy. Thank you so much.
Okay, bye-bye.
And for all of you watching us on YouTube or Facebook, whether you're home or in the hospital, thank you for joining us here today. The video of today's session and all the videos from our live series are available on the CPBF website, which is the CanadianPremies.org. We are a charitable organization, and we believe that through education and support, we can empower families, ensuring they are ready to care for their premature baby. Visit our website, consider making a donation. Together, we can create a brighter future for all families. I'll see you again next Friday, 1 p.m. Eastern Time. Stay well, and I see you soon.